Yes, very good morning and good afternoon, and thank you to all of you. Before I begin, I want to ask all of you to give yourselves a round of applause for being here. Thank you for taking the time. I think it's an investment in yourself and in all our country's futures that you have managed to come from near and far. Some of you have driven, some of you slept in airports, some of you missed your flights, some of you bought your own flight because you missed your connection, but you were so determined to be here, and that shows the level of commitment and interest in what we're discussing today. I'm joined by an esteemed panel. We have an apology from Sandra, and it's unfortunate that Sandra can't be on this panel because she was really going to provide a very unique perspective as a young enterprising woman who is manufacturing, value adding, and she's the founder of a cosmetics line. She's exporting into the region, and I thought that we would benefit greatly from her lived reality and her experiences. But I think that my colleagues will be able to translate a lot of that because of the work that we do on a daily basis. So in this segment, I'm moderating what I hope will be a very insightful conversation. And to set the context a little bit beyond the presentation that Ndiitah has given, I just want to go back to the vision. Because the Pan-Africanist founding father of Ghana, Nkrumah, in 1963 delivered a speech on African unity. And he's famously quoted to say, quote unquote, "We must unite or sink." His words were amplified by the man that we call the father of the ECOWAS, Professor Adebayo Adedeji from Nigeria, who said, quote unquote, "You must first set your house in order, create the conditions for integration." Prof. Adedeji was an architect of regional integration, and his ardent belief in the integration of Africa led to the development of the Lagos Plan of Action, and he led the negotiations that gave birth to the economic community of West African ECOWAS as we know it today. It took someone with a vision to begin engineering this process about 50, 60 years ago, and we are only now beginning to realize some of the manifestations of those visions, including the reforms of the African Union that we're witnessing today being championed by President Kagame. This speaks to Ndiitah's emphasis that you need the vision to sustain you, and we must believe that we are the generation that can reach the unreachable in this lifetime, one single market. So while this aspiration for the political and economic unity of Africa goes back to the OAU, the forerunner of the AU as we know it today, it lost momentum along the way as the continent plunged into Cold War eras of coups d'etat and one-party states. So we were a little bit derailed. Even as we wanted to do this, there were setbacks in our development and political journey. The dream was later invigorated in 1991 by the June Arusha Treaty of 1991, which established the Africa Economic Community, the EAC, as we know it today. That was the beginning of a revival and a pivotal moment in our continent's history. Following an inertia of about 20 years where nothing was happening, and since then, there's been a significant ramping up of our integration agenda, politically and economically. And I think this AfCFTA agreement is really the landmark agreement that lands that ambition. So Sub-Saharan Africa, which is all of us here today, is experiencing a unique growth in our young population. We're increasingly educated, urban, connected by mobile telephony. And while young people believe in the dream of African integration and the possibility of building the one African market, the question that is doing the rounds in every single one of our minds is just exactly how are we going to unlock this transformational opportunity? How are we going to do it? So this session aims to provide a high-level overview on the Protocol on Women and Youth and Trade and aims to spell out exactly how. What is the process that has been undertaken? What will be the process for implementation? Where do you fit into this process of implementation at the national and regional level across the different governments? And at the center of this is how young people and women are going to be better supported and strengthened to fully participate. I'm joined by Gonaya Monei from Secretariat, Ndiitah Nghipondoka from the Ministry, Stacey Pinto, who is the Chief Executive Officer for the Namibia Trade Forum. And let me launch maybe with leading questions. We are also managing time, and we have approximately 30 minutes. And we do want to have at least one opportunity for reactions from the floor, so I'm also going to limit the questions to the panel so that you have an opportunity to interact. But I'll begin with Ms. Sethora to guide us through the process of negotiating, not just the protocols, but the broader AfCFTA, the framework, the main framework and its attendant protocols, and also to speak us through the process going forward in terms of where exactly we are now.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone. Hello. This is a youthful forum, and I'm not really getting the energy. Or should I do with the South African way? Viva young people, viva! Viva! Viva young people, viva! We're thinking about one of the best frameworks that the African Union has ever brought forward in Africa to integrate young people within the international trade activities. But let me just take you through of how this decision of the AfCFTA protocol came to. At the 13th extraordinary session in 2020, head of states, which are the presidents of the African Union or African countries, made a commitment to broaden the scope of the African Continental Free Trade Area. Mr. Ndiitah has given you a background of what is the AfCFTA. After the AfCFTA was adopted, head of state agreed that we need to broaden the scope. And we cannot have the AfCFTA without young people. This commitment was made at the 13th Extraordinary Summit in 2020, where they said they are going to broaden inclusiveness through the interventions to support young people, which they said young Africans, women, and small enterprises. It was then in 2022, at the 35th Extraordinary Summit, actually not the Extraordinary Summit, they have decided that now, because they have committed to broaden the scope of the AfCFTA by interventions that support young people, women, and small medium enterprises, we then need a protocol on women and youth in trade. How many of you here are traders? Oh, trade meaning you are involved in business. Either in trade in goods, you have something you are selling, or you have a saving that you are selling. This is very good. It means that we are talking to the right people. The young people in this room know the challenges that young people go through when they have to trade across borders. Due to our age, it is very difficult to get collateral, right? For you to be able to be funded by institutions, they are requesting for collateral, which most of us don't have. Even some of the government grants request for collateral. So it makes it very difficult for us to advance in our businesses. But just to take you through on how the negotiations for this protocol have gone through, as the moderator has asked me. So after the commitment of the 13th Extraordinary Summit that has spoken into broadening the inclusiveness, it was then agreed that the AfCFTA protocol on women and youth will be negotiated. And the protocol has been negotiated. And when we were negotiating this protocol and developing the protocol, the first thing that the Secretariat did was to get recommendations from young traders on how do they see the protocol to address their challenges. So we firstly had regional consultations on women and youth in trade in Kenya. We secondly also held our first conference on women and youth in trade in Tanzania last year, which was basically meant because within the conference, we had round tables for women and a round table for youth in trade, Why? Because we believe that young people and women at the same time, they actually don't experience the same problems. So it was during those roundtables that we were able to capture challenges that both groups experience when they trade across borders. So the main objective of this gathering was to guide the Secretariat on the key elements of the protocol on women and youth. So when you take the protocol itself as it has been negotiated, it provides articles that have provisions that addresses challenges that women and youth actually experience. And this protocol has been negotiated by young people who are actually in trade. Why? Because it is because of these consultations that we get to get these challenges they experience and possible solutions that they experience. So whatever that you will get that is coming from the protocol, just know that these are recommendations that we have gathered all around Africa so that we tackle every challenge that young people are experiencing in trade. So I'll just stop there for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gonaya. And the next session is going to take a deep dive specifically into this protocol on women and youth and trade. We've expressed that those who negotiated it have understood the challenges. This session also serves as, this meeting also serves as a validation exercise that we agree that there's a common position, a common voice on what these areas look like and what kind of possible reforms need to be put forward as we implement. Ndiitah, I appreciated your presentation. It was very practical. I think you spoke our language. I think we could relate. You didn't get us lost in the jargon. We appreciate that this is the biggest trading bloc since WTO. It is a big deal. Countries as small as Namibia also have got very legitimate fears. We are 2.5 million people. And yes, we have an industrialization ambition. We want to manufacture goods and export goods in as much as we're an importing economy. But the truth is, when the borders become translucent, we are competing with the rest of the continent. And those with bigger muscles, bigger productive capacities, economies of scale, have got significant leverage, sometimes over small countries like ours. I would like you to speak us through how we're going to implement this and harness these opportunities from the country perspective. We appreciate that our SAPO offer has been accepted. We appreciate that our government is pushing for Namibia to be one of the 9 countries on the GTI. We would be among the first few countries to pilot trade. What are the priority sectors? And all these traders who are in the room, where do they enter? What are the entry points?
Thank you so much, dear Daisy. Yes, a very important question, and one that we do need to allay the fears of especially most of you here that are business people. I always say, I think we should look at our reality. Let's read Namibia's reality. We are in SAPO, right? Who is south of the orange? The biggest, most industrious, nation on the continent. Okay, the biggest economy is Nigeria, but South Africa is the most, I think, industrialized. So if we could live in SAPO, and we still have the maybe fledgling industrialization going on, I think that the AfCFTA opening up should not be our main concern, because then we are with South Africa the most efficient so far on the continent. So I think really the fears of the AfCFTA, let's allay those. It's not going to make a big dent on us. I think the dents are already there from others. Now, how are we going to implement this agreement? I think very, very important. Last year, I don't know if it was in this room or in Country Club, I'm not sure which one it was. We launched the AfCFTA implementation strategy and roadmap. And that implementation strategy, I know, yes, you did say Namibia has a lot of strategies and policies. Yes, you guys your shelves at Ministry of Trade are full of documents. But I think this one, I was very hopeful with this strategy because it really consulted the most broad range of stakeholders on how we are going to try to implement and leverage from the AfCFTA. I think going back, we again look at our own domestic tools and policies in place. We know that prior to COVID, we had a dip, and that's why government implemented the fiscal consolidation, and I think at that time, we realized that our economy was very, very dependent on government services. So that when government cut its expenditure, the whole economy shrunk. Right? And we realized that that is not sustainable, it cannot continue that way. We then looked at what are those pro-growth activities that we can have. I'm saying all of these things because there is a linkage to everything, all right? So AfCFTA will only be harnessed if domestic tools are in place. Of course, we have growth at home. I know a lot of people have a lot of things to say about growth at home, but if we didn't have growth at home, we wouldn't have had the cosmetics industry doing what it has. So if we have to assess and say, what are some of those outcomes from growth at home? I think growth at home has really shown us that if you are deliberate, you will be able to actually make those inroads. And the cosmetics sector, I think, has done very, very well. Another thing about growth at home, it gave institutional frameworks, etc., that would come to enable trade to do better. Growth at home, whatever it is, will ultimately be the one that decides whether we're actually successful in the AfCFTA. Right? So, and the onus on the policymakers is to ensure that we go with the stakeholders. I think one of the things that we've been hearing lately is private sector-led growth. Remember, because of the government-led growth, it's not very sustainable. So it has to be private sector-led growth because there your innovation is much quicker. Your adaptations are much quicker than the rest of us that are in government where you have the bureaucrats, etc. So yes, so how are we going to implement this AfCFTA, excuse me, is we have articulated a strategy, and in that strategy, maybe just one of the things that I should mention to you is basically we looked at what is our current trade profile and what is our competitive advantage. We also then looked at the markets in Africa that source those products that we export, and then try to see what it is that we can advance in those countries. But very, very important is also your investment. Okay? And I think most of you are aware that the NIPDB, Namibia Investment Promotion and Development Board, was established primarily to promote investments both domestic and internationally. So we're working hand in hand with those. Another thing that the government is also looking at is the trade and commercial attaches that are, and even the embassies that are in different countries. They are fully aware that this is now, I think we've now moved into a stage of economic diplomacy, more than just normal political diplomacy, because everybody wants to advance that agenda. I agree with the moderator to say that we are also competing. However, I think that as much as we are competing, I think the synergies and the collaboration outweigh the competition and the threats that we're getting from this. We've mentioned, Minister in her speech mentioned the value chains that we're engaged in. So as SACO, that's one of the things that we want to do is to see how we can strengthen those value chains. Very important, I think, is a policy on gender and youth mainstreaming. I think most of you probably don't know this, but there's actually a department in the Ministry of Gender that comes to government ministries now and then, and they actually ask, the programs that the ministry is implementing, please tell us how many youth and how many women are involved in those programs. So this, when it comes from a policy perspective, it makes it more sort of focused and deliberate and urgent that we actually need to disaggregate the data that we collect. So for the AfCFTA, I was able to say that yes, we have a protocol on women and youth. So there clearly we can take that there is mainstreaming on the work that we do. We can look at something else like maybe another one like maybe BIPA. BIPA is the Business and Intellectual Property Authority. when they register companies, is there a way in which we can fast track or facilitate the registration of youth and women businesses and find ways in which we can synergize and make it actually easier for them? So these are some of the things that we are looking at, but definitely youth and gender mainstreaming is coming across in all our work. So when I report my KPIs at the end of every quarter, we are asked how many women and how many youth are engaged in those activities that the ministry is undertaking. So this is how we hope to meet some of these objectives. Thank you.
Thank you, Ndiitah. I hope before we end the session, I'll be able to circle back to you. I still have a follow-up on the regional integration value chains. But Stacey, in your day job, you have been doing a lot of work consulting the e-commerce ICT sector, looking at value chain mapping on our ecosystem. And ICT and tech are probably the enablers for trade and services. We know that there are many challenges continentally that could undermine our ability to leverage ICT. There was a report by UNECA in 2018 that said that Africa in its totality is facing an infrastructure funding shortfall of approximately in excess of $70 billion US. So we need a lot of money in order for us to connect our countries and our regions in order for us to trade. And ICT is the sector that depends a lot on logistics and mobility and movement. So I would like you to share a few reflections on the opportunities with ICT, particularly in trade and services.
Thank you very much, Daisy. Really want to say thank you for this wonderful meeting. One of the things I am a proponent of is to be as close or as proximity close to the people that you work with and consult with. And so for me, this is an opportunity for us to learn. I'm looking forward to some of the Q&As. Just in answer to your question, if you know, the Military Forum with support from EU Africa Rise last year did an e-commerce readiness assessment for Namibia. And that was really brought about by two things. Number one, the onset of COVID. So what we saw happening very increasingly was that people were a little less open to going to the stores to buying product because obviously the health risk. And so we saw a really quick upsurge of e-commerce delivery services, whether it was by Pick and Pay, I know Tambula is in the room, Chomi Bites, etc. I have small children. I felt safer paying for something online and having it brought to my house. And so in that so-called calamity, we saw a really quick upsurge of young people trying to fill in the gaps, young people trying to find solutions for our eminent problems. And as destiny would have it, now we have the AfCFTA that is properly talking about digital trade and e-commerce as an enabler for trade, because essentially that's what it is. I think we are very quickly going out of the traditional ways of doing business, where I walk into a store, I want my loaf of bread or meat, and you pay your money. And we are very, look at the EUs of this world. Convenience is such a huge economic activity that is creating a lot of jobs. And so in these areas, we're very quickly moving away from the traditional ways of doing business. What does that mean? A lot of people want convenience. For the people in the room today, I always ask, convenience, I think I did some stats last week, is selling about $1.7 trillion. People want time. They want time to invest in the things that matter. They want time to spend with their family. They want time to be able to pursue their passions. So if you can provide a service that allows a person time to do the things that matter, there you're filling in a gap. So I asked in the room today, I saw there was a couple of hands of people who are doing business. How many of you are graphic designers? How many of you are good at taking photography? Social media is becoming a booming industry for business. Are you selling those services both to your local community or even regionally? Let's talk about regional integration. We're talking a lot about trading with Zambia, with Angola, with Botswana. I'll give you some stats real quickly. For the informal sector, just between the borders of Gonaya and Angola, we're looking at respectively 49 to 46% trade in those two countries, in those two borders, and that's predominantly by youth and young people. So one thing that I always like to say to people, look at your environment, look at what's going on. When we set up dialogue like this, it is not to take a box. It is to tell you that this is what's available, this is what's open. And maybe in closing on this question, one of the things that we do very well as an Namibia Trade Forum is we try and make it intentional that we meet with private sector youth and women as open as possible so we can learn what the challenges are, but most importantly, be able to give feedback. One of the things we've noticed as private sector or even people in the room today is that business is it's ever-changing. It's not often you find business always working in tandem with public policy. We do what we have to do because we're entrepreneurs, we're trying to be innovative, but therein lies the challenge. And so in coming back to the point of how do young people benefit from protocols such as these, let us go and figure out what are the young people trading in? What are the women trading in? Who are they talking to? Who are their trading partners? In those ecosystems, how do we bring our leverage as policymakers or strategists to be able to pronounce what they're doing? I think we're over the stages where we go to the communities as saviors. We're not. They know what they're doing. They've figured out a way of doing business. How do we take that, add value to it, and bring it into mainstream economy? I think that's the approach that we need to take. Figure out where the young people are, who are they talking to, who are they trading with? With me as my hat, as Ndiitah, everyone sitting there, how do we bring our expertise to be able to add value to what young people and women are already doing and not reinventing the wheel?
Thank you very much for that, Stacey. I feel like we're just scratching the tip, but we do have a session tomorrow that is focused just on digital trade and e-commerce, and I hope that we'll be able to take a deep dive into some of those opportunities and challenges. As the afternoon after lunch session will also give us a lot of perspectives from the grassroots with people who have been working with these communities, Women in Rural Association, among others. Let us pause here and open the floor to take any questions, comments, before we come back to round up this session, which was really just an introductory session.